everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk. Thank you for joining us for another great movie review. My name is Dennis, and today I want to talk to you about a film I just saw for the first time called Bloodline. But before we dive into that, if you are a fan of movie reviews, 4K Blu-ray reviews, game reviews, TV reviews, and some tech reviews, we do them all here on the channel, so please do make sure that you hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on. Now, for those of you who have been around a while, you know horror is my thing, and so I love to every once in a while just go on Hulu, Amazon Prime, Peacock, whatever streaming service, and just scroll through the recommended for you. And this popped up, and I was very interested because if you could see here, this is Seann William Scott, someone who you may know as Stifler, or maybe, you know, from the Dukes of Hazzard films, or even Role Models, or Goon, if you're a hockey fan like I am. So you know that he's kind of a funny guy. So to see him in a movie that was recommended for horror fans, was very surprised to see that. And this movie was released in 2018, I believe, directed by Henry Jacobson. And what really sold me on it was that it was produced by Blumhouse, or Blumhouse. I'm not sure how you say it, honestly. I've heard people say it either way, but to me, it is Blumhouse. So when I saw they produced it, I was like, man, this must be a pretty good film, because I am a huge Blumhouse fan, love what they do, so I had to check it out. So once again, this is starring Seann William Scott as Evan. His wife is played by Mariella Garriga. Her name is Lauren, and the two of them are married, and basically Evan, who you see behind me, is a school counselor or a social worker. So they live in California, and he works in a school, kind of guidance counselor, sort of therapist, where he sees these kids, talks to them every day about their futures, their careers, their college plans, things like that. And what he does is, when he hears a particularly bad story, which as we come to see in the film is really just about abuse, you know, parents who abuse their children, uncles, aunts, dads, everything you can imagine, he really can't take it. So he decides to take matters into his own hands. So spoilers ahead. If you haven't seen it yet, I recommend you check it out. I mean, you know, it's not a blockbuster film, but it's a pretty good film. I actually enjoyed myself throughout. I thought it was pretty interesting. A lot of the acting was really good. And honestly, to see Seann William Scott in a serious role, at first it was kind of hard to get past, but the way he played it wasn't really super sinister. He was more just kind of awkwardly sinister, if that makes any sense, but I enjoyed it a lot. But again, spoilers ahead. So essentially, like I said, he's a counselor for these kids, and when he hears particularly bad stories, he decides the law isn't going to do anything. You know, this person comes and goes as they please, and when they come back, they beat the kid, they, you know, sexually assault the kid, they leave, they come back, and it just keeps happening. He basically takes on a role of, you know, the most famous way I can put it is Dexter. You know, this movie is kind of if Dexter's TV show were to be made with, you know, mixed with a Bates Motel or, you know, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, because there is like a weird mother-son dynamic throughout it as well. So what we learn is when Evan was very, very young, he had an abusive father. His father was kicked out of the house one day by his mom because she couldn't take it anymore. He was beating Evan so badly she just threw him out. He came back to get Evan one day, and that's when a whole fight broke out, and his dad ended up beating his mom up in this fight. And when the dad won the fight, he reached out to Evan and said, hey, come with me, you'll never have to worry again. And Evan, being a mama's boy and knowing how abusive his dad was, decided nope, pulled a knife and stabbed his dad and killed him. From that day on, his mom kept that a secret. They buried him in the backyard and pretended nothing ever happened, and supported him in his kind of quest that he would go on to become a vigilante of sorts. So what he does is he goes throughout life, and anytime someone he feels deserves to die is presented to him, he goes out of his way and kills them. So we see it a lot. You know, there's a kid who comes in, and his dad is a drunk and beats him relentlessly. And one day he comes into school with a black eye. He says, oh, I can take it, but he went after my little brother. So Evan decides, I'm going to go get him. He poses as like an Uber driver at a bar, pulls him in the car, brings him to this house. It's a house that's been abandoned on this huge lot. And what he does is he actually records the killing. He doesn't videotape it, he voice records it. And he asks them when they're tied up, tell me what you were feeling when you were beating your child. Why did you feel it was the right thing to do? Almost like a psychology experiment. It's very odd. And the people always, for the most part, deny it, and they say, I'm not a bad person, and, I didn't mean to. He knows what he needs to know, and he murders him anyway. So the whole plot throughout is kind of the struggle that he has in protecting all of these other people and doing what he does, with the fact that he's married and has a newborn child, which, by the way, they show the birth, and it's kind of insane. They show the baby coming out like full blown. It's not implied. It's like camera on, baby coming out. So if you're uncomfortable with that, I wouldn't recommend, watching that scene. Maybe mute it, close your eyes. But while it's happening, he's having flashbacks, because you're hearing these noises. I won't gross you out too much, but the noises are reminding him of when he kills people. And so he's really struggling with this, because what he's doing in his mind is right. He's saving kids. But he also realizes that it's wrong and could put him at risk and end up leaving his very own child fatherless, which is the last thing he wants to do, because that's how he grew up. So he really struggles with this throughout, and eventually things are catching up to him. The burial site where all the people that he killed were buried gets found by a dog walker, which is pretty real. If you follow any sort of real crime or true crime podcasts or TV shows or any of that, you see all the time it's people walking their dogs who find this stuff. It leads back to him, because they say, this detective shows up and says one thing they all have in common is their kids all go to the high school you work at, and they actually are all patients of yours. They all see you regularly. So the walls are kind of closing in on him, and he's kind of trying to think of how to get out of it. He's not really sure. All the while, his wife is kind of on the fence, because she's starting to realize this might be true. He may be a murderer. But she's also struggling with, he might be a murderer, but he loves me and he loves our children. And I know he's doing it from a good place in his heart. And I really, really don't want to leave my child without a father. So she's balancing that as well. And his mother comes into play, who is played by Dale Dickey. And her name is Mary. She is there throughout the whole thing. She's older than the previous scenes, obviously, when he was a kid. And they, like I said, they have a weird relationship. At one point they're talking and she says everything's going to be okay, and like tongue kisses him on the mouth. And the wife sees this, but like kind of never says anything about it. So it's really kind of awkward. But essentially everything, comes full circle. And in the end, big spoiler alert here, they end up going, and the wife, we think she makes a phone call and says, I believe you, meet me today. And Evan says, I don't know, she told me she has to go shopping. I don't know if I trust her. So he's following her, thinking that she is going to rat. But really what he finds out is she had called one of his students, who was the biggest one, accusing him of murder, and really the only thing that was linking him to these crimes. So she called that student to meet with her, because she said, I believe you, let's arrest my husband. And when they meet, she pulls a gun, puts it in his hand, and then throws it up to his neck, boom, pulls the trigger and makes it look like he kills himself. And Evan watches this unfold, and he can't believe it, because now he realizes, wow, my wife just protected me. So then what do? They take the kid's phone, send a text out saying he's the one who committed the murders, and that's that. Detective comes and says, I'm so sorry your student passed away. With the confession and the suicide and everything, this seems to be an open and shut case. And the movie ends with Evan and his wife and his mom and his baby all living happily ever after, even though they are murderers. So it was pretty interesting. I mean, it's pretty clear that it drew its inspiration from Dexter, because, he's obviously a guy who works in the public space, and he deals with bad people all the time, or victims of bad people all the time. But it is interesting, because it kind of shows you that balance of like, sometimes the system does fail, and what would you do to make things right, and how far would you go to make it right? But also, like, at what cost? Because everything he did to help all these other people almost cost him his own family and his own life. So it was pretty interesting. Being that it was a new film, I thought it was shot well. Everything was good. The acting was pretty good. I was very surprised, like I said, to see Seann William Scott play a serious role. But overall, I think he did really, really good. Again, he wasn't like a scary killer. You could just tell he kind of had these like lifeless eyes. He was very psychotic. I think he did a great job. I think his wife was wonderful. The mom played a great role. Everything was really good. I think overall it was a pretty solid movie. I'd give it probably like a 7 out of 10. I think it was pretty good. I'd watch it again if someone wanted to. Again, I like to be as unbiased as possible to horror movies. I just love to watch them and how hard it is to make films. I respect the people who are involved in them. And while this is kind of recycled material with the whole Dexter thing, I do think they did a good job. And it was interesting enough that, throughout the whole time, I wasn't bored. I wasn't wondering when it was over. It also runs for only like an hour and a half, which I like because, it doesn't feel like you're sitting there counting the minutes. So again, overall, pretty good movie. I'd recommend it to any horror fans. It's not really a scary movie per se. It's more of a thriller, but definitely enjoyed it. Think it's worth a watch. So if you've seen it, please do comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Maybe you hate it, maybe you love it. Would love to know and have that discussion with you. And if you haven't seen it, if you do check it out, make sure to come back to the video and shoot us a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. As I always say, my opinion isn't the law. I'm always interested to hear what other people have to say. Maybe you take something different from it than I did, or maybe you have a point to prove that, it's not as good as I thought, or it's better than I thought. So, open for that discussion. Make sure you comment below. And of course, as always, please do make sure that you subscribe. Nothing supports the channel more than when you hit that subscribe button. And remember, as always, tell your friends.